Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be checking out the Furibee Nebula 230, and I've been looking forward to checking this one out for a couple of reasons. First of all is the looks. I think it's a great looking copter. And second of all, the name. I love stuff about space, so for me, this model has the best name I've seen of a copter for a long time, because usually at the budget end they give them stupid names, but I think this is a great name. Now, it's taken a while to get to me, this one. In fact, I made a news video a couple of months ago when GearBest first listed this on their website, and it's only just got here, and they've been doing this quite a lot, and I have fed it back to them that you shouldn't have models listed on there that you can buy if it's going to be a couple of months until they ship, at least have a pre-order status or something like that. So I hope they take that feedback on board, because in general the Furibee brand has been great. They've released some cracking budget models, and I think it would be a shame for people to ignore the brand because of the shipping time. So we had the Furibee Futon 200, one of my favorite RTF models ever. Unfortunately, they have discontinued it. And then my current favorite, which is the Furibee DarkMax, which takes a 6S, absolutely bonkers model. And then they released the X215, which had a couple of issues, but in general it flew well. It had a little bit of noise on the video there, and I do believe they're releasing a newer version of that. So hopefully I'll get to check that out. This model actually is very similar to the X215 components wise, so yeah, it should be interesting. Well, let's take a look at the specs. So it's a 230 sized frame, so it's a 5-inch class model, and it comes in two versions, which is the plug and play, and that is this one, and then there's the bind and fly, which I haven't gone for this time because the bind and fly is an XM receiver, and I've been having a couple of problems with XM receivers when it comes to the firmware and them not working properly, so I thought, you know what, I'll get the plug and play version, add my own receiver. So we'll take a look at how I have done that. Also, the plug and play version's currently about £125, and I think they've got the pricing wrong, because the bind and fly, when I have just looked, is at £160, so you're not going to pay that much for a receiver. So yeah, anyways, I'm not much of a fan of the XM receiver these days, so this is an XM Plus on here, so I would recommend get the plug and play version. And yeah, there's no other options anyway, so if you're running Fly Sky or DSMX, then you want to go plug and play anyway and add your own receiver. So the frame, now it's got this lovely veneer on it, this carbon veneer, but the frame actually is mostly fiberglass from what I can see. And I think they've done that for weight, because it's actually a lightweight model. I've seen other frames called the lightweight edition, and they've had this material in the middle, and then we've got like carbon veneers here. It's actually only the arms that have this material in there. We've got carbon fiber plates here, and this is also carbon fiber as well. So it weighs 308 grams, which doesn't make it an ultralight, but it's not ultra heavy either. You don't get a battery with it, and it is a 4S model only, so I'm going to be using these Tattoo R-Line 4S 1300 milliamp batteries, and it weighs 480 grams with that. I really like the flat top. I think for a model that's got a huge flat top like that, then it isn't too bad when it comes to the weight, and as I say, probably down to those arms. And at the making of this video, I don't think there is any parts for the frame, so you might want to wait out on that. And yeah, unusual design compared to recent models that I've seen, because the ESCs, you can see they're individual ESCs, and they are only 25 amp. They are flashed with BL S, however, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it is the component choice, but they are only running multi-shot. They will not boot up in D-shot, so bit of a downside there, unfortunately. So then here we've got a stack, and I haven't seen this for a while. It's a power distribution board, and then above that we've got an Omnibus F4. It's the micro SD card edition for black box there, and then above that we have got the same VTX as the X215. So it's a switcher, it's 40 channel, so it switches between 25 milliwatt and 300 milliwatt. I want to check the power output of that though, because on the X215, on the 25 milliwatt setting, it was only outputting about 13 milliwatt, but I think that might be because it was running through a 5 volt regulator on the Kakute F4, whereas this is completely different flight controller here. So the motors, they are completely unbranded. They are a 2205 2600 kV motor, and then we're running the 5042 props there. I think they're the same props as the X215 as well, and you're given a spare set of those, and those are red. The spinners are directional here, so they're not locking, but they're directional, so you're gonna need to use a hefty socket to screw those on, or a spanner, which I have done there. Then we have got a LED board at the back that is connected to the DIN. We have got a really huge buzzer here, so you want to make sure you remove this little sticker, otherwise it won't be very loud. And you are given a linear antenna, and it is RPSMA. The only thing I've noticed is the screw here. It gets very loose, so I'm gonna need to tighten that up there. But other than that, you don't get anything else in the box. I should talk about the camera. So the camera is a CMOS camera, which is a shame. It's a 4x3 CMOS camera, but it's got, well, they say it's got a 2.8mm lens on it. It looks narrower to me than that, but we'll take a look at the flight footage later. So the camera is connected to the flight controller, which has Betaflight on-screen display on there, so that's nice. It came flash with Betaflight version 3.17, so I have upgraded to the 3.2, and the target is Omnibus F4SD, and it wasn't set up whatsoever, so there were no modes in there. It didn't even have the UART selected for the receiver, so it's UART 6 for this one. I have switched up the PIDs just because they were stock PIDs here, and tend to find that the D's too high on stock 3.2. I altered the rates to 0.8. I added the craft name as Nebula, and I moved some of the stuff around on the on-screen display there as well. And there's no board alignment with this one, so you don't need to mess around with that, but fairly easy to set up. Didn't have to mess with any of the S-Bus inversion commands there. You just have to have the serial RX on the UART 6, and then have S-Bus for the receiver protocol, and serial RX on there as well. And I have bound it to my Tyrannus, so that is in TAER for the channel map. I have set it up so that we have got a 2-position switch on the AUX 1 for arming. AUX 2, I've got my modes, and I've set it up as angle and then acro. I've got anti-gravity on automatically, which you can do on 3.2, and I've got air mode and dynamic filters turned on as well. And that is about it for the setup. But what I want to do is take the top off here, and let's just have a look how this thing is constructed inside. You have to be really careful taking this off, because once you've removed these screws here, the sides and the top will come off. But if you are just taking the top off to access the VTX, because yeah, you can access the VTX through these holes here, but it's quite tricky to do so, and you can't see the LED display very well either, which is a bit of a pain. So yeah, you can just remove the top, but you see these wires here? You have to be careful because they can get cut in here. It's all fitting very tight, so you can just lift the top part off there, and you can see there's my XM Plus receiver, and then there's the LED for the VTX, and you've got the button there. So that button lets you go through the 8 individual channels there, and it's actually a double press to go through the different bands, and then it is 3 presses to go between high and low, so you get a H and an L on there. But in order to get a receiver in there, you're going to have to remove this as well. So this also lifts up here. It's really tricky to get back on though, so be very careful that you don't trap any of these wires when putting it all back together. So this is where I've got the receiver plugged in. We've got the signal there, the 5 volt and the ground. You also have to make sure that you've got S-bus shorted there, or obviously if you're using PPM that has to be shorted. There is a 3 volt and it is down here, so you can run Spectrum as well. And let's see, so we've got our PWMs down here. Looks like we have got, these are the LEDs over here, and it looks like the VTX and also the camera is plugged in underneath. So we've got these nylon standoffs here, and those have to come out if you want to take a look at the underneath, so why not while I'm here. So I just noticed that the VTX has the RF shield removed, just like the X215 had, so that it could fit in this stack. So I'll have to see if it produces noise like the last one, and that would be a shame. I don't know why they've done that. It would fit in here. So let's lift this up and take a look. So it looks like this is where all the camera is going in, and we've got a common ground, so that's nice. So our on-screen display should show properly, and then this is the VBAT. And then underneath here, this is interesting, it's the power distribution board, and I've just noticed the problem. They've soldered the VBAT up to a regulator. VBAT is soldered up to 12 volt. And that's not right, because that means that the on-screen display will always show 12 volt. Oh dear. I wonder if that's just a mistake on my one. This is like one of the first versions, so I'd be interested to see if other versions have come soldered like that or just soldered correctly. They should be soldered just to the positive and negative, because I think I'll have to check. I think this board can take the full voltage. But yeah, I'm going to have to change that, otherwise my battery telemetry isn't going to feed through correctly. What else have we got here? So it just seems to be like a power distribution board for the battery and the ESCs there. Yeah, I guess we need that when you're using individual ESCs. Don't think there is a current sensor from what I can see. So not a big deal, but yeah. If you're buying this as an RTF and don't want to mess around, then yeah, it's not huge for me. I'm just going to have to desolder this and solder up to some of the other pads. But yeah, a little bit of a pain that. Hopefully they can correct that. Okay, so let's see what the power output is on the low setting. Look at that. Same as before, only 9 milliwatt. That's not great. Let's have a look at what it's like on the high setting. The same. That's not good, is it? It's only running off a 5 volt regulator of the on-screen display, and it seems like that's not enough for the full power of this VTX. So I've switched the plus and minus from the 12 volt there, so we just have a plus and a minus pad here that's going straight to the VBAT. But I'm just thinking, I wonder if they are running it through this regulator, because if you run it off VBAT, then there's not enough power for the VTX. So now I've done that, let's power up the VTX and see what the power is like. So starting off on the high setting, Even lower, 7 milliwatt. That's the high setting. What about the low setting? Look at that, just 0.4 milliwatt. So maybe that's why they put it through the regulator, but then your VBAT doesn't come through, so that's no good. Same as the X215, I don't like this VTX. Okay, let's go for the line of sight with this one. Feels very light on the throttle, just a couple of clicks and it's airborne. Fairly quiet on low throttle, but let's have a look at the punch. Oh man, it's getting blown around here today. So just the stock props with this one. And just as you would expect, the kind of response from a 5-inch. Not bad at all. Let's try acro. So I have put some PIDs on here that are not the stock PIDs just to get it going. Seems okay, line of sight. Oh, it ain't off windy today. This thing's fast. Yeah, looks like it's flying nice, line of sight. No vibrations or anything like that. Need to be careful here because the wind's pushing it back. So I'm having to compensate when I'm doing some of these maneuvers. Damn, they're so fast. Nice little whistle from the motors there. Don't know if that's going to come through on the camera. Oh, it is really getting pushed by the wind. But that's expected. So far so good. I'm trying to do these power loops, but it doesn't want to play the game with the wind pushing it directly into me. But yeah, I think line of sight, at least it flies nice. It does remind me of the X215. Very similar setup in that respect. So let's come in for a landing and do some FPV with it. So for the FPV flight, I decided to keep it wired how it was out of the box, which is why it's saying 11.9 volts constantly on the on-screen display. I just didn't feel comfortable flying with less than 10 milliwatt of power, and you have to remember that's a depleting number as well. The VTX loses power as you get through the flight as the battery goes down, and also as it heats up. So yeah, I kept it wired how it was. So the field of view for me on the camera is way too narrow. I would switch the camera out if I was getting this model, and there's a little bit of jello on there as well, and it's not dealing with dynamic range. So yeah, camera no good for me, needs switching out. As for the wiring, this is how I think it should be wired. So we've got a 12 volt regulator on that power distribution board. So I think that should be used to power up the camera and the VTX, because the 5 volt regulator on the flight controller, it's obviously not providing enough amps to get the desired amount of milliwatts out of the VTX. So power the camera or just the VTX off that 12-volt regulator. I'm sure that it is rated for it. And then power up the flight controller off the VBAT, so we get the correct battery voltage telemetry coming through, and then link up a ground between the power distribution board and the on-screen display so that it doesn't flicker, and I think that is how it should be wired up. So yeah, for me, this one, I mean, yeah, it's gonna fly out of the box, but it's got a few issues, just like the X215 had for me, except this one just isn't wired up. I'd be interested to see how other people receive this, because, you know, this is one of the first ones. It flew fine, you know, and I think all of these things are fixable. There's no noise, should I say, but I guess that it's running at such a low power, maybe that is why. But yeah, no noise on this one compared to the X215 with that Kakute F4, but I imagine the regulator on the Kakute is much stronger, because that one did get a higher power output. I think it was 200 milliwatt, maybe, I can't remember. But it seems like the 5-volt regulator on this Omnibus F4 is not providing the correct amount of amps for this model. And if you cheat and hook it up to the built-in 12-volt regulator of that power distribution board, then you can just about get away with it, but I wouldn't want to fly any further than 100 meters with it, that is for sure. And I think just a little bit of rewiring could actually make this into a decent model, but how I've received it, like this, with no battery telemetry and it having a very low power output on the VTX, then I would say get the DarkMax instead, because I think it is a more complete package. But I think this one's got potential, I do. So lots of downsides though. I think the fact that the arms aren't complete carbon fiber, that will put people off. I don't think that is the biggest issue with this one. I think it flies well in general, and I like the idea of it. And it was fairly easy to tune. It flew nicely, so I can't knock it for that. But yeah, I had to mess around a lot with it. So I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out, and I'm going to come in for a landing. So as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.